Thank you very much. I'm going to speak for a few minutes, then we're going to take a break. And then we're going to have open discussion. I want to speak to the policy makers and the finance ministers in particular about the implications of what we've heard. Both the need for the scale of action that we've heard about and the technical pathways to succeed. The basic story that I think in summary is a fair summary is that we have to decarbonize the energy system by mid-century or earlier, and we're going to have to follow that by negative emissions in the second half of this century. That's the bottom line. Given the timing of infrastructure, it means any investments now in further fossil fuel generation or infrastructure is almost bound to be the wrong decision, because anything invested now lasts for 30, 40, 50 years. It's inconsistent with decarbonization. Any new coal-fired power plant put in place today has a 40 or 50-year time horizon. Any major expansion of infrastructure for gas pipelines, for fracking and so forth, is the wrong direction when clearly our big challenge is to get to zero, increasing the scale of the fossil fuel industry makes no logical sense, and that's true everywhere. Also, what the evidence suggests is that we've already reached grid parity in most locations or moderate locations, and meaning that clean energy use is already economically feasible at not even net incremental costs. But what all of this means also is that economies that are running on fossil fuels need to stop running on fossil fuels progressively over the next 30 years. There are two kinds of countries in the world, those that have fossil fuels and those that don't have fossil fuels. If you don't have fossil fuels, think clearly about your technological path, but you will not have a great drama. You have a technical problem. You pay for electricity to begin with. You pay for your energy. Typically, you're importing a lot of energy right now. The end result may be higher national security because you'll be importing less and using more of your own energy in any event. There won't be a great drama of closing down coal mining sectors or oil and gas sectors or large political actors in your economy like major oil, gas, or coal companies. You're lucky. You should be able to think clearly without being bombarded by lobbying. Then there's the other kind of country in the world, those that have oil, gas, and coal inside. Generally, politics is insane in these countries. The lobbying is relentless. The corruption is very, very high. The money that goes into politics is very large. And getting out of what was the most powerful political sector for the last century is not simple. If you want to know a powerful lobby, it is the oil lobby. Because oil ran the military. Oil was national security. Oil was global power. I can tell you in the United States, we are an oil country, dominated, drenched in our politics by oil. That's why Texas produces presidents. That's why the big money comes from that sector. That's why we have a president who has said he is going to pull out of the Paris Climate Agreement. That's not just his bad temper. and bad manners, that is domestic politics. And so this is really grim, because we're talking about very narrow interests and the balance of survival on the planet. So if I could get the presentation up, I just wanted to make a few quick remarks. I have.
I'll be back in.
Oh, okay. Oh, sorry. Sure.
I just want to escape and miss the best parts, and I'll be back very quickly. Yo voy con el secretario.
So here's what I would like to suggest from the finance minister's point of view. Goal setting, systems transformation, design of your power sector, climate financing issues, and quickly some issues about carbon pricing. The goal, I won't belabor again, the goal is at least to decarbonize by mid-century. You're out of time. In other words, everything now to achieve that goal means everything now has to be directed towards that goal. There's not 10 more years of the old economy and then you get around to it because of the lifetime of infrastructure. So this is something that basically has to start now and should have started before. Every country is invited under the Paris Climate Agreement to have a roadmap. Article 4.19 of the Paris Climate Agreement calls for countries to produce a mid-century strategy. I would urge every country to have a mid-century strategy, because without that you cannot even think straight. And mid-century is tomorrow in infrastructure. It's not distant future. It is tomorrow. You're building it now. So have a plan not to 2030 like the nationally determined contributions. You need a plan to 2050. And when you get your engineers together, ask them for at least one variant, which is to zero emissions by 2050. They'll know how to do that. They will look up the work you just saw. They will incorporate your national data. They will make assumptions about electric vehicles or electric heating or electrification of industry, whatever it is that's particular to your country's circumstances. But they will produce for you a pathway to zero. But they'll tell you, stop the following 6 projects, which are going to take you in the wrong direction and make it impossible to reach zero by mid-century. Okay, what is wrong in this world, just to be very clear, is about 10 countries. They're all big and powerful countries. This is something that we need to face, and the finance ministers need to face, because these are your colleagues. This is what's wrong. There are about 10 countries that account for 80+% of fossil fuel production in the world. They're all on the nasty side, if I may say so, because they all want to continue their privilege of fossil fuel production and exports. Even if they're good guys domestically, like in Canada, where they want to reduce their emissions domestically, they want to sell their toxic products to you maximally. So they want to build ports and pipelines and refineries to sell you their nasty stuff, even if they don't want to use it themselves. One characteristic of about half of this group is Rupert Murdoch, who is the world's most dangerous media individual, because he runs a network of media in the English-speaking world that is completely designed to propel the fossil fuel industry for as long as possible. That's his job in Australia, that's his job in the US, that's his job in Canada, and it's very powerful stuff. And this is one of the reasons why the politics are so bad. But it's not only the English-speaking world that is disastrous in this. Of course, Russia is a complete petrostate, which lives on almost nothing but Gazprom at a high level. This is very serious. And China and India are the swing determinants of the future of the world, because climate change is killing them, they run on coal, and they need to decide what to do. And they don't want to run on coal. They actually don't want to, and India will become uninhabitable it's already almost uninhabitable in the southern part of India. They know that they need to change, but they're the swing right now. The Gulf, no help. Saudi Arabia, no help. So this is really the drama, not the other 180 countries in the world. This is where the politics are going to be made or lost. And we've got pretty tough thugs in a lot of these countries, starting with my own, the United States. This is not a game. This is the reality. And the U.S. Senate hasn't voted one measure for climate change since 1992. Just beware of that. Not one single law for climate change since 1992, since it ratified the UN Framework Convention, because our politics are completely corrupt. And if you're interested in the money flows, I'll point you to the information. But that's what's broken right now. So we need to really be aware of that. For the rest of the world, think clearly, move in the right direction, and then we have to figure out with these big countries how they're going to be gotten under control so they don't wreck the whole planet. Because that's really the drama here. The United States, Russia, Saudi Arabia, China, India. If we have those five in the room, with the plan to decarbonization, the world will be saved. China and India, I'm not too pessimistic about, because they're net energy importers and the situation is dire for them. I'm worried about the US, Russia, Canada, Australia, actually, and the Gulf, because that's where the real power lies of the fossil fuels. So the reason why you have all these technical solutions but no solutions is power. I wouldn't call it political will exactly, I would call it power. Of course, it's a strange, misguided power, the power to ruin the world. But if you look around the leaders of those countries, they don't seem to be too much dedicated to saving the world. They seem to be dedicated to saving their power. So that's a big issue. Okay, now on the brighter side, the more constructive side, what to do? First, the clarity of the vision. There are two kinds of governments now, other than on the good side. There's one kind of government out to destroy the world, advertently or inadvertently. Then there's the other group, which is basically the other 180 countries. And I would divide them in two. Some of them understand that we're in a dire crisis and really need to reach zero. And the others rather want to say, we'll do something, this is real, we're taking steps, we'll reduce our intensity of CO2 emissions, we'll make some small progress, not understanding the real story here. So it's the difference of window dressing and getting to the crux of the matter. And the crux of the matter is getting to zero, not making a little bit of progress, because we're in a runaway situation, perhaps now or perhaps very soon. So we're not talking about small steps in the right direction. We're needing to make very big steps. So the first thing I would urge is understanding getting to zero by 2050 is not some crazy idea of school children. It's the absolute existential reality that we face, And the reason we don't adopt it is power, not the irrelevance of it. And believe me, by the way, I know the politicians in Washington. They know better than they sound. They're not as stupid as they sound. They are just on the take, all of them. So please understand the real politics of this. We don't have to play their game. We need to say directly what is happening. And this is a struggle for survival against a small, concentrated group of interests right now. So helping your public to understand 100% decarbonization is a first key point. Understanding that in a place like Chile or a place like Paraguay or other countries here, that you've got so much solar power, or so much hydropower, or so much every power, that this is completely feasible and economical is the next point. But that is absolutely the case. You need roadmaps. You need a guideline of what to do between now and 2050 and what it means to get to zero. And you just heard technically what it means. The core of it is electrification. This is clear. There is no roadmap in the world that doesn't start with zero carbon electricity as the complete fulcrum for saving the planet. There is not a single study that isn't built on clean electricity as the basis. Because with clean electricity, you can do almost everything that you need to do. You can run much of the economy directly, you can electrify vehicles, and you can synthesize clean fuels, such as hydrogen or liquids that can run things that now run on fossil fuels, can run on synthetics. So clean electricity is the story. Every country needs to expand its electricity generation. This is almost sure. And the other thing that every country needs to do is connect to its neighbors, because one of the basic points of variable renewable energy is the larger the grid, the safer is the system, actually, because you always have offsetting sources of intermittent energy. So a larger grid is absolutely a key part of the story. A European-wide grid, which is still not built, a Latin American-wide grid, which is absolutely fundamental, an Asia-wide grid, and so forth. Transport is either hydrogen or direct electricity or synthetic hydrocarbons. Building sector can be all electrified. Industry is a mix of technologies, but electrification, direct reduction of metal ores, and many other technologies can substitute for the emitting technologies. Land use is a big part of the story, maybe 25%. Ending deforestation and moving to more renewable forms of agriculture, including the release of methane and nitrous oxide in agriculture, is also important. And then remember, we're going to have climate disasters greater than today, no matter what we do. It will be warmer in 2050, no matter what we do now, no matter how heroic the world is now. There will be more disasters, there will be higher sea level, there will be more storms, droughts, floods, heat waves, and so adaptation is absolutely fundamental. I won't belabor this except to say zero carbon electricity, sustainable land use, electrification of transport, buildings, industry, synthetic fuels, energy efficiency. Remember, the air will be cleaner when you do this. Lots of people will feel better, live better, have healthier lives when you do this. This will reduce air pollution significantly. Air pollution claims more than 5 million deaths per year, premature deaths around the planet. Asia lives under a permanent cloud of massive pollution. So there's a huge co-benefit of this. Some Brightline rules. Whenever I'm at the Vatican, I like to have everything in groups of 10 commandments. Here are 10 commandments of climate. No new coal plants, stop oil and gas exploration, no new fracking, no new pipelines, stop deforestation, shift to battery electric vehicles by 2030, reduce beef eating, divest from greenhouse gas companies and projects, stop the oil companies from breaking our necks, and interconnect renewables, larger regional grids. This is absolutely essential. What are the policies? Actually, I've said most of this, so I'm not going to belabor it, but what are the fiscal policy tools as finance ministers? When you have a roadmap, then you need a budget. And the budget, of course, moves the resources. And you need financial regulation. And so the two great areas of finance ministry policy, of financial market regulation and budgeting, are absolutely essential to turn a roadmap into a policy framework. What are some of the policy tools? Of course, public investments in infrastructure, transmission lines, infrastructure for zero electric vehicles, public transport, adaptation and resilience. We're all going to need new market design for variable renewable energy. For energy systems to run 100% on renewables needs a new regulatory framework, because it's very hard to run a renewable energy system entirely on spot market electricity prices. So that's why issues like capacity requirement auctions, medium-term contracting on power purchase agreements and so forth are part of the market design for variable renewable energy. Blended financing is crucial. We're going to talk about that after the break. Social protection for vulnerable regions and households is a core part of fiscal policy. And if you have a fossil fuel sector, homegrown, there's going to be huge political demands for phasing it out. In Germany, it tied up politics for 20 years. How to get lignite, dirtiest polluting fuel, in the Energiewende, how to get it out of the mix. And they decided that they would take 20 years more to do it, but at least they set 2038 to end all coal use in Germany, and with a lot of social protection spending. There should be an R&D budget in every country for the adaptation of these technologies locally. There should be a budget for ecosystem service payments for land use. There will need to be carbon pricing as a support to the regulatory environment, with a lot of details on that. Then you have financial market regulation issues, which are very important. Your banks are continuing to invest in fossil fuels. New York banks are investing hundreds of billions of dollars every year still in fossil fuels. These are stranded assets. These are horrible investments that are going to have to be closed down midway. And financial market regulation, at least you should tell your banks, stop investing in this stuff because you're going to go broke and we're going to have to bail you out in the future. And so this is a matter of macroprudential regulation. We're going to need border taxes reflecting CO2 emissions from recalcitrant countries. You should put up tariffs against US goods in the future, because the US is going to be late to the game, and you should tell the US, sorry, we can't import from you. You're a polluting country. Your exports have a high carbon content, and we need a regulatory regime of border taxes to help enforce this. I'm sure the EU will come around to this, and it will make a very big difference, because the EU is the world's largest market. And if the EU puts on CO2 border taxes, it will tell the rest of the world this is serious business. And it is serious business. We need international climate financing, not only domestic. Some of you are recipient countries, others are donor countries, but the Green Climate Fund, the Global Environment Facility, ODA, the long promised $100 billion that is such a tiny number, but the rich countries have completely reneged on it since the word was, not completely, but the big countries have reneged on it since the idea was uttered by Hillary Clinton in Copenhagen in 2009. It's been 10 studied years of confusion, but we need international climate financing. And then the final category that I want to mention is losses and damages. People are getting killed all over the world by climate shocks now. There's no compensation at all for them. There's no international system for them. It's just injustice. And we are in a situation of plain, outright injustice. People are suffering and dying for things they didn't cause, and they have no place to turn. And this also is something for the international financial community. We are completely interconnected in this challenge, and we should be interconnected in the solutions as well. The clearest vision I know of this is a Chinese idea of global energy interconnection called GuideCo. It is adopted by the China state grid. China figured out in its own decarbonization efforts that all of their good, clean, green energy is in the west of China, and all the population is in the east of China. So they are building thousands of kilometers of high voltage direct current lines to carry the wind, solar, and hydro from the west to the population centers. Then they got the bright idea that that's the world's problem, not just China's problem, that the high quality renewable energy needs to be interconnected with global population centers, partly for balancing intermittency and partly for shifting high quality renewables to the places that it's needed. Remember that high quality renewables are in deserts, they're in mountains, they're offshore, they're not where the people live. And so bringing them to where populations is a basic investment. But I like this map, which is from this GuideCo, this Global Energy Interconnection Development Cooperation Organization, because it also reminds us that we are truly interconnected, we're all in this together, and we have to get serious. So my bottom line recommendation to the finance ministers is make a national plan. Make a national plan, not an NDC. That's too easy. Make a national plan to 2050 that goes to zero. And when it looks puzzling how to do that, call in your top engineers, energy systems experts, and say, we need to get to zero. How are we going to do it in our country? And how do we do it as part of our neighborhood? And I think the pleasant fact is this is the least of our problems, because you'll find very good answers to those questions. You will find very reassuring answers to those questions. Once you've solved that, then I would appeal to you, get 180 finance ministers together and then sit down with the other 13 and say, okay, time's up. For the whole world, we need to act together, because it's the remaining 13 that are probably the toughest puzzle of all of this story. Thank you very much.